Okay, good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday morning, so I thought we would start kind of reviewing by talking about the DBQ itself, either about a little bit about the documents, maybe. If people have questions about the documents, we can talk about those for a little bit. If you have questions about the rubric or what goes into the paragraphs, we can talk about that as well. So is there anything like that these people in the room feel strongly about? Can we talk about this or talk about that?
The outside evidence.
Yeah.
How many do we need?
You only need one piece of outside evidence total for the whole essay. One per essay. So what I wrote on the board for every hour, like what a body paragraph looks like, I will include that. I'll add that to the board as well. So as you're writing your paragraphs, you'll have that as kind of a guide. So, and I'll write down like outside evidence once per essay, cap analysis only 3 times per essay. So we'll include that. Let's talk a little bit about the two DBQs, everybody. I have copies of the documents here as well. Are there any questions about the documents? Like, wait, what is this document talking about? Or I'm thinking about using this one. Any questions about them? Yeah.
So you're like you get to choose between which one. Are you gonna show us the questions beforehand, or
no, it's going to be more like, which one did you want to do? The political one or the economic one? And you just take it. So, but I can kind of talk a little bit about the documents here. So I had 2 lenses, political and economic. So when I'm looking at the political documents, I'm seeing a lot about participation in campaigns. I'm seeing a lot about elections. And so just thinking about like what we've discussed in class, I think we can come up with a lot of different ideas and things from the documents themselves that are about this that I think we can eventually put into like body paragraphs, right? For example, that very first image where it has all the colorful maps, that's talking about how there are different qualifications for voters. Over time, what is the trend that we see for voters? Like, is there more people being able to vote, less people being able to vote? Who can vote now who couldn't before? What's the trend? Okay, so universal, white male suffrage. Okay, so before we have people who you need to have a certain amount of property, a certain amount of wealth, and then you can vote. And over time, we see more and more people gaining the right to vote, regardless of how much money they own. I remember talking about class about the common man, right? Where people thought that we should try to do what the common man wants, and let's do the everyman. But there's some people who didn't like this, right? Who did not approve of trying to reach out to the common man? Hey, Jefferson didn't really like it. Who else was kind of against the common man? Adams, John Quincy Adams. Remember, these people are afraid of the common man. They think it's going to lead to mob rule. That the people are going to start mobs in the streets, and that's going to be what's going to change our policy, and that's not right. We shouldn't do that. kind of. I think those are kind of two different things here. I'm thinking of even like later in 1840 when we have remember this, the log cabin and hard cider campaign. Remember that meme that we saw in the 1840s of the guy drinking the champagne and he's like, "Oh, I'm fancy." But then when he tried to drink cider, the drink of the people, he couldn't drink it. It was like too strong for him. Or the idea of like, "Oh, I live in a log cabin. I'm just like you," right? This is showing that they want to reach out to the common man, okay? That the people are important to elections and campaigns. Participation in campaigns, we had things we talked about in class like parades, mass meeting, right? So I'm almost kind of seeing a paragraph form of this, right? Like I'm seeing qualifications for voters. That could be one thing. Like who's able to vote now? I'm seeing like how the campaigns are actually done, parades, mass meetings, even log cabin campaign. And I could even see this idea of like people being against it as a counter argument, right? That could be its own paragraph, even, right? So I'm kind of seeing even paragraphs or like similarities between the things we're talking about in class in these documents. And I think looking at the documents yourself, you'll be able to see this too. So any other questions about these documents? Let's look at the economic side. So economic side is all about transportation innovation. And a big theme we talked about in class was as transportation and economic changes are happening, this is creating, in some cases, national unity or sectional conflict. We talked about that in chapter 8. What are some examples of innovations in transportation that's taking place during this time? Changes or inventions? Yeah. Railroads, steamboats, canals, the national road. Right? So you have people who are believing this can lead to economic change, right? By creating these canals, these roads, these steamboats, this is going to make it easier to ship supplies from one part of the country to another. If you're moving out west, you can still be unified or connected to the businesses out east. Yep. This one is the political one with the map on the front. And the economic one is the other one that's all black and white. Right? This is all called internal improvements. Internal improvements. That's the phrase that they use to describe spending more money on this types of transportation. One way it's helpful is that it enables us to send more stuff from one place to another, make some money. Perfect. It also leads to social connection travel times are cut down. Okay. It takes a lot shorter amount of time to go from one part of the country to another. We have immigrants who are helping to build our infrastructure. So they're becoming a part of the national conversation, the national citizenry that is building up our internal improvements. Yeah, right. So document 6 is talking about all these immigrants coming in. So they're going through all these trials, but is the country truly benefited by this great foreign immigration? Have the people been made wiser, better, or happier? It has been said that without these foreigners, our railroads and canals could not have been constructed. Okay, so that's one perspective he's pointing out. But the progress of internal improvements a year or two in advance of what they would have been without this foreign labor will be a very poor compensation, offset by the corruption of manners, the forfeiture of freedom, and transfer of power to those who know how to use it wisely. So what that's basically saying is this guy is saying, well, there's lots of immigrants coming in and helping us build this infrastructure. Some parts of the country are not being benefited by it, and they don't like immigrants coming in. Yep. And some parts of the country don't like that innovations are bringing new immigrants to the United States. Because with internal improvements means you need a lot of labor, a lot of people working on these job projects. Most of these are in the north, and so they're looking for cheap labor to work on these projects, and they turn to a lot of immigrant labor in the early 1800s. Some parts of the country don't like that. Some northerners don't like it because they don't like the immigrants coming in. Southerners don't like it because it's leading to internal improvements are just in the north. South is mad because internal improvements are mostly in north. With all of this happening and connecting the north, some people in the south are afraid that the south is losing states' power. Okay, that's document 4 or document 3. Yeah.
For a half question, if it says like on top of the document, could you use that to answer?
Yeah, because one of the questions was you can say like who the intended audience is. However, let's say you're looking at document 1 in the economics section, and it says Robert Fulton, inventor, to Albert Gallatin, Secretary of State, letter 1807. It's not enough just to say this letter was written to Albert Gallatin. Instead, we need to show like why that's important. So like this guy is a Secretary of Treasury. He is in charge of a lot of money in the government. So he's writing to this guy specifically because he has a lot of influence in our national policy. So you need to go a little step further than just what's in the source line, right? Or if you're doing point of view, you can't just say, oh, the author is Robert Fulton, and that's it. You have to say, like, who is this guy? Like, why is he important? what's his demographics? How much power does he have? Stuff like that. You will get a rubric while you're writing the essay. Or the political one. Yeah, that's this one I was talking about before, right? It's talking about how qualifications for voters change over time. So especially this political essay is all going to be about change. How did things change over time? And so this document A is a perfect example of showing change over time. FYI, when I give you the DBQ, it did not work very well for it, so I'm going to have it on the front board. But if you have the color, you'll be able to see how in the beginning, in 1800, there's lots of states who have like tax qualifications or property qualifications in order to vote. By 1830, most of these states have gotten rid of those qualifications, and voting restrictions are not based on your wealth anymore. Now it's based on gender, race, citizenship status. So again, this is not saying that, wow, look at all these people who now vote, because there's a lot of people who are being denied their right to vote, but it is an extension, and it's moving towards more people voting. Yes?
Did you do like ideas for counter argument to one for everyone?
Yeah, so if I said, this is how, these are all ways that it changed, you could either talk about, here are some ways it stayed the same, or here are people who are arguing against that change, who don't like that change, right? Like, oh, John Quincy Adams doesn't like the idea of the common man having too much power because it might lead to mob rule, right? So like if you're looking at the documents, document B, James Kent, the extreme democratic principle of universal suffrage has been regarded with terror by the wise men of every age. So he's talking about, like, if you give voting rights to everybody, that that scares people. That's a bad thing, he's pointing out, right? So that'd be an example where he's not necessarily coming up with an alternative, but he's criticizing the change that you're talking about in your essay. So that could be a counter argument. For this one, when you're talking about all the things that transportation innovation leads to national unity, the counter argument is how it leads to sectional conflict, right? How some parts of the country don't benefit from the internal improvements or the innovations, or are against how it's being worked, and how it leads to some parts of the country disliking it. That's what you could do, hypothetically. This is all hypothetical situations and things I'm talking about. Wink, wink. Okay. Any other questions? Is this making sense? Okay. So when you're writing your essay, you will have on the front board like what goes into a body paragraph. Remember, everyone's getting 7 documents total. To get full points, you need to use 6 of those documents. Most likely that means 2 documents per paragraph. And when you're looking at it, like, oh, okay. Can I find 2 documents about voting qualifications? Can I find 2 documents about like mass meetings or log cabin? I think I can find that. Or 2 documents against giving people right to vote. I could probably do that. And if you're thinking like, oh, geez, you know what? I can only find 1 document as a counter argument. That's okay. Maybe just have one document as your counter argument, and your outside evidence could fit into that paragraph. Right? So you have like 1 document and 1 piece of outside evidence, and then one of your other paragraphs will just have 3 documents in it. It doesn't matter where you put things, just make sure you have the total number in your essay. Yep.
But like outside evidence, like
you do the same thing you did with the documents, where you describe like what it is, and you explain how it answers the question. So if your outside evidence is mob rule, you would describe what is mob rule, and then you would explain how it's your counter argument. So if you're talking about how things change or why people like this, your counter argument would be explaining why people are against giving more people rights and how they think it's going to lead to mob rule. Yeah. And then Libby. That would be people like Jackson. Remember, he stopped doing internal improvements. Calhoun. Those are some big ones. Jefferson. So I think both of the documents go from early in this time period, like 1800, 1815, to like later 1840s. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Libby was for. I'm fine if you are able to come up with one piece of evidence as counter argument. That's great. I'm fine with that if you're able to describe it and explain how it answers the question. But some cases, you'll find enough documents. There might be 2 documents that are counter, and your whole paragraph is a counter argument. That's fine too. It will. Yep. If you use a document as a counter argument, that counts as one of your 6. Yep.
Yeah.
Remember, you do need an introduction paragraph because we do, and I have it on the sideboard over here, contextualization. So what's happening in the United States? If you're using the political documents, you're probably going to talk about like, what are social changes? Like, what are economic changes? Basically, all the things that are on the other document, you'd basically say like, this is what else is happening in America. There's a lot of transportation innovation. There's still slavery. They don't have, you basically talk about everything else but the political changes, right? That's contextualization. You do that in 3 sentences, and then you go to your thesis statement. You answer the question, and you give 3 arguments that will eventually become your body paragraphs. So if I'm talking about, what are political changes in this time period, I might say there are many political changes, including qualifications for voters, how the common man was involved in the campaigns, and maybe I'll say at the beginning, like, however, there were some people who were against this, against giving the common man more power without it might lead to mob rule. Something like that could be a thesis statement. You make it sound better than what I said. Something like that could be your thesis statement, right? You do not need a conclusion paragraph. Yeah, just a concluding sentence just helps to wrap up that sentence. So, and when we get to later DBQs, that concluding sentence helps us to make sure we get another point like that complexity point, but we don't need to worry about that today. Right now for that concluding sentence, it's just basically repeating the topic sentence of that body paragraph saying, there are many different changes and qualifications for voting, which led to more people having the right to vote. Something like that, super basic, general, to end the paragraph. Okay. Questions? Yes.
Like for economic, like the picture. How could that be?
Yeah, so anytime there's a picture, you want to figure out, right, what's the purpose of the document. So like in this one, we see it's an engraving in James F. Buckingham, English Traveler, The Slave States of America, 1842. The engraving, Slaves Shipping Cotton by Torchlight, depicts the loading of cargo on the Alabama River, bound from the port of Mobile, Alabama, on the Gulf of Mexico. So we have a boat coming to Mobile, Alabama, and what's being loaded onto the ship? Cotton. Okay, so this shows they're shipping supplies that's going to be going to this is on the Alabama River going to Mobile, Alabama. So basically, once it gets to Mobile, Alabama, then it's going to be shipped somewhere else. Okay, so this could show this shipping supplies, how economic or how transportation innovation leads to economic changes or positive changes and eventually national unity, because it's maybe they're trading with another country or maybe they're trading with a different part of the United States. That's how we use that. Any other questions? Should we just remind ourselves like what goes into a body paragraph? Okay. Am I good to erase this? It's all being filmed as well, so if you want to watch this later or see this, it will be on YouTube and then posted on Google Classroom, so you can watch it later or screenshot it. So we start off in our body paragraph. With a topic sentence. Right? If you think of the CER paragraphs, you do that in science, right? CER. Okay, your claim, that's your topic sentence. Okay, this is what the paragraph's going to be about. But then we need to give our evidence and reason. So think of it like that. Okay, if that's helpful for you to think of CER, we're doing evidence, reason, evidence, reason. I will. Yep. So we have, let's say, document A. I got to give my evidence and then reasoning. So first I'm going to describe the main idea. And then explain how it answers the question. So if the question's asking me, how were there political changes during this time? Each time I talk about a document, I need to say, this shows a political change. If the question's asking me, how did this transportation innovation lead to national unity? Each time I say document, I need to show, this is how it leads to national unity, okay? Whenever they add that phrase into that question, you need to put in your essay a whole bunch of times. It's okay, especially for this first essay, to be super basic and say, this is how it leads to political change. This is an example of national unity. That's fine. Use those words because then it shows you are answering the question with the documents. Use document B. I'll describe and I'll explain. Now remember, I'm adding this, I'm going to add to this paragraph, so it's going to be a mega paragraph. Doesn't all have to be in the same paragraph, but it can be. And we're going to do app analysis. I don't need to describe all 4 parts for the document. I need to just choose one. Choose one question to answer. How many times do I need to do this in the whole essay? 3 times. Now, I could just do conclusion paragraph. That's fine. That'd be a great paragraph. Somewhere in your essay, though, you're also going to add that outside evidence. Somewhere you'll add it. It doesn't have to be in this paragraph, but it can be. And in that, I'm going to describe what it is, and then explain how it answers the question. And then I'll end with a concluding sentence. Yeah, Mira? Yes. Yep. Outside evidence can be treated just like any of the other documents. It can be outside evidence. It can be, well, it is outside evidence. It can be a counter argument, or it could be in agreement with your documents. How do you explain? So you don't explain how it answers the question. You would explain how it like goes against the question, or explain how they are criticizing what you're arguing. right? So maybe here's an example of what an essay could look like. Body paragraph 1, body paragraph 2, body paragraph 3. So maybe you have document A, B, and I'm going to do a half analysis for this one. And then I'm going to do, let's see, C and D. Oh, I'm going to do my outside evidence for this one. And maybe I'll do half for that. Maybe I'll do E and F. Perfect. You could do that. That's fine. You could even do, let's see, 1. Maybe you like this. Outside evidence. Maybe that's fine too, right? Each one of those, I still use 6 documents and outside evidence somewhere, right? Does that make sense? So you can kind of place it where you want, where it makes sense with the documents you have been analyzing.
Of their argument, like either a document from like a document you give us, or it could go.
So like, maybe this is your counter argument. Maybe this whole paragraph is a counter argument. Maybe it's just that. Doesn't matter where you put it, as long as one piece of evidence is counter argument for this essay, that's good. Are we good? Okay, this will be up on the board. You come in, I'll probably erase this part. That might confuse people who weren't here for it. You're going to do great. If you have any questions, just let me know, everybody.
Oh, Mr. Barnes. So